Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that a newly appointed board member with extensive experience in a different industry has identified potential strategic opportunities that differ significantly from the company's current direction. This board member is eager to propose these new strategic avenues, but has not yet fully familiarized themselves with Koch Holdings' established risk appetite statement, its current risk management framework, or how risk considerations are integrated into the existing strategic planning process. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for this board member? Option A. Remain silent about their strategic ideas until they have independently conducted a detailed market analysis to validate their proposals, without consulting internal risk or management functions. Option B. Advise the board that the current risk management framework appears overly cautious and suggest a comprehensive overhaul before considering any new strategic initiatives. Option C. Proactively engage with the Chief Risk Officer and relevant senior management to thoroughly understand Koch Holdings' risk appetite, the existing risk management framework, and the current integration of risk into strategic planning before formally proposing strategic shifts. Option D. Immediately present their proposed strategic opportunities to the board, highlighting the potential benefits and urging a swift pivot in company direction based on their industry experience. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage with the Chief Risk Officer and relevant senior management to thoroughly understand Koch Holdings' risk appetite, the existing risk management framework, and the current integration of risk into strategic planning before formally proposing strategic shifts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in corporate governance where a newly appointed board member, despite good intentions, may lack a full understanding of the company's established risk management framework and its integration with strategic decision-making. The challenge lies in balancing the need for fresh perspectives and constructive challenge with the imperative to adhere to existing, well-defined governance processes and risk appetite. A failure to properly integrate new insights into the existing framework can lead to misaligned strategies, unmanaged risks, or inefficient resource allocation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves the new board member actively seeking to understand the existing risk management framework, the company's risk appetite, and how these are embedded in the strategic planning process. This demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and responsible governance. By engaging with the Chief Risk Officer, CRO, and relevant management, the board member can gain a comprehensive understanding of current risk assessments, mitigation strategies, and the established tolerance levels. This allows for informed contributions that are aligned with the company's risk profile and strategic objectives, ensuring that any proposed strategic shifts are evaluated through the lens of established risk governance. This aligns with principles of effective board oversight, which require directors to be informed and to exercise their judgment within the established governance structures. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the new board member immediately advocating for significant strategic shifts based on their initial observations, without first understanding the company's risk appetite and existing risk management framework. This bypasses established governance processes and could lead to the endorsement of strategies that expose the company to unacceptable levels of risk, violating the board's fiduciary duty to manage risk prudently. Another incorrect approach is for the new board member to remain passive and not engage with the risk management function or management team, despite having concerns or ideas. This represents a failure to exercise due diligence and contribute effectively to board oversight, potentially allowing unaddressed risks to persist. It also fails to leverage the board member's unique perspective to enhance governance. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the existing risk management framework as bureaucratic or outdated, without a thorough understanding of its rationale and effectiveness. This demonstrates a lack of respect for established governance and could lead to the dismantling of crucial risk controls, potentially exposing the company to significant unforeseen liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in governance roles should adopt a structured approach when encountering new information or proposing changes. This involves 1. Information gathering, actively seeking to understand the existing framework, policies, and procedures. 2. Stakeholder engagement, consulting with relevant internal experts e.g., CRO, CFO, legal counsel, and management. 3. Impact assessment, evaluating the potential implications of any proposed changes on the company's risk profile, strategy, and operations. 4. Collaborative decision-making, engaging in constructive dialogue with the board and management to reach informed decisions that align with the company's best interests and regulatory obligations. This process ensures that decisions are well considered, risk-aware, and aligned with the company's governance objectives. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern among investors regarding the company's adherence to disclosure requirements for related party transactions. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this feedback? Option A. Immediately suspend all new related party transactions pending a review by an external audit firm. Option B. Publicly issue a statement reassuring investors that the company is fully compliant with all disclosure regulations. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive internal review of all related party transactions over the past 3 fiscal years, documenting compliance with disclosure policies and relevant regulations. Option D. Advise the investor relations team to deflect any further questions on this topic until a full understanding is achieved. Correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive internal review of all related party transactions over the past 3 fiscal years, documenting compliance with disclosure policies and relevant regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for transparency and responsiveness to stakeholder concerns with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance and protect sensitive information. Misinterpreting or mishandling stakeholder feedback regarding regulatory adherence can lead to reputational damage, regulatory sanctions, and erosion of trust. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the feedback and implement appropriate, compliant corrective actions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the specific concerns raised by stakeholders. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and a proactive stance in addressing potential issues. By engaging with relevant internal departments and external regulators, if necessary, the company ensures that any identified gaps are addressed in a systematic and compliant manner, aligning with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory oversight expected under the COC holding hiring assessment tests implied regulatory framework, which emphasizes robust compliance mechanisms. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the feedback without a formal investigation. This fails to acknowledge the seriousness of stakeholder concerns and can be interpreted as a disregard for regulatory obligations. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care owed to stakeholders and regulators. From a compliance perspective, it risks overlooking genuine regulatory breaches, leading to potential penalties. Another incorrect approach is to implement superficial changes without understanding the underlying issues. This approach is a form of regulatory window dressing and does not address the root cause of the feedback. It is ethically questionable as it creates a false impression of compliance. Regulatory bodies would likely view such actions as insufficient and potentially misleading. A third incorrect approach is to immediately escalate the matter to external legal counsel without internal assessment. While legal counsel is important, bypassing an initial internal review can be inefficient and may lead to unnecessary legal costs. It also misses an opportunity for internal learning and process improvement, which is a key aspect of maintaining a strong compliance culture. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to stakeholder feedback concerning regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the feedback. 2. Conducting a thorough, objective internal investigation to ascertain the validity and scope of the concerns. 3. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements potentially impacted. 4. Developing and implementing a corrective action plan, if necessary, with clear timelines and responsibilities. 5. Communicating findings and actions to relevant stakeholders and regulators, as appropriate. 6. Establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and review to prevent recurrence. This systematic process ensures accountability, promotes a culture of compliance, and mitigates regulatory and reputational risks. Question 3. Which approach would be most prudent for COC Holding to adopt when considering a new business strategy that has significant potential for revenue generation, but also involves operating in a sector with complex and evolving regulatory oversight? Option A. Prioritize the potential financial benefits of the strategy and address regulatory concerns only if they become significant obstacles. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines to ensure full compliance before proceeding with the strategy. Option C. Seek regulatory approval for the strategy only after it has been partially or fully implemented to demonstrate its viability. Option D. Proceed with the strategy, assuming that any regulatory issues can be addressed and resolved after implementation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines to ensure full compliance before proceeding with the strategy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. The need to balance profitability with compliance demands careful judgment and a robust understanding of the applicable legal and ethical frameworks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and comprehensive review of all relevant regulations before implementing any new business strategy. This aligns with the core principles of regulatory compliance, which mandate that organizations must understand and adhere to all applicable laws and guidelines. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and risk mitigation, ensuring that the company operates within legal boundaries and avoids potential penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. This approach fosters a culture of compliance and embeds regulatory considerations into the strategic planning process. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the strategy without a thorough regulatory review fails to meet the fundamental obligations of regulatory compliance. This constitutes a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a disregard for the law and a willingness to operate in a potentially non-compliant manner, exposing the organization to severe legal repercussions, including fines, sanctions, and potential business suspension. Furthermore, it undermines the integrity of the organization and erodes trust with stakeholders, including regulators, customers, and investors. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking regulatory approval only after the strategy has been partially or fully implemented, is equally problematic. This reactive stance suggests a lack of foresight and a failure to integrate compliance into the initial stages of decision-making. It can lead to costly remediation efforts if the implemented strategy is found to be non-compliant, and it may signal to regulators a lack of commitment to proactive compliance. This approach can also create a perception of attempting to circumvent regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the potential financial benefits of the strategy while downplaying regulatory concerns, represents a severe ethical lapse and a direct violation of regulatory principles. This approach prioritizes profit over legal and ethical obligations, which is fundamentally incompatible with responsible business conduct. It exposes the organization to significant risks and demonstrates a clear lack of understanding or willful ignorance of the importance of regulatory adherence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the proposed business strategy and its objectives. 2. Conduct a comprehensive assessment of all applicable regulatory frameworks, laws, and guidelines relevant to the strategy. 3. Engage legal and compliance experts to interpret regulatory requirements and assess potential risks. 4. Develop a compliance plan that integrates regulatory requirements into the strategy's implementation. 5. Seek necessary approvals or clarifications from regulatory bodies before implementation. 6. Continuously monitor and review the strategy's compliance post-implementation. Question 4. The review process indicates that a significant client has requested a specific trading strategy that, while potentially profitable, raises concerns about its alignment with market integrity regulations. The proposed strategy involves executing a series of trades designed to influence the price of a particular security in a manner that may not reflect genuine market forces. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the professional to take? Option A. Advise the client that the proposed strategy is too risky and suggest they seek advice from another firm that may be more amenable to their trading style. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed trading strategy against all applicable market integrity regulations, seeking clarification from the client on their objectives and exploring alternative compliance strategies if necessary. Option C. Execute the trading strategy as requested by the client, assuming their intent is legitimate and that any perceived regulatory issues are minor. Option D. Implement the trading strategy with minor adjustments to obscure its manipulative intent, thereby satisfying the client while minimizing the risk of detection. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed trading strategy against all applicable market integrity regulations, seeking clarification from the client on their objectives and exploring alternative, compliant strategies if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for a specific outcome and the regulatory obligation to ensure fair and transparent market practices. The pressure to satisfy a key client while upholding compliance standards requires careful judgment and a robust understanding of the regulatory framework governing Cox Holdings operations. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to severe consequences, including reputational damage, financial penalties, and legal action. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the client's request against the relevant regulatory framework, specifically focusing on rules against market manipulation and insider trading. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the law and ethical conduct. By seeking clarification and ensuring the proposed action aligns with regulatory guidelines, the professional demonstrates a commitment to integrity and responsible market participation, safeguarding both the firm and the client from potential violations. This proactive stance is crucial in maintaining trust and long-term business relationships. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the client's request without adequate due diligence, assuming the client's intent is benign. This is a regulatory failure, as it neglects the responsibility to actively identify and mitigate risks of market abuse. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to act in the best interest of market integrity. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without understanding the underlying rationale or exploring compliant alternatives. While caution is necessary, an overly rigid response can damage client relationships and miss opportunities to educate the client on regulatory boundaries. This approach fails to balance client service with regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach is to subtly guide the client towards actions that, while not explicitly illegal, exploit loopholes or create an unfair advantage. This represents a significant ethical failure and a potential regulatory breach, as it undermines the spirit of the law and can be construed as market manipulation. It demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to engage in borderline practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that begins with understanding the client's objective. This understanding should then be rigorously cross-referenced with the applicable regulatory framework. If the request appears to conflict with regulations, the next step is to seek clarification from the client and explore alternative, compliant methods to achieve their objective. Escalation to a compliance department or legal counsel is essential when there is any doubt about the legality or ethicality of a proposed action. This systematic process ensures that client needs are addressed responsibly and within the bounds of the law. Question 5. The analysis reveals that Cox Holding is considering adopting a new cloud-based customer relationship management (CRM) system that promises significant improvements in sales team efficiency and data accessibility. However, the system's data storage location and the vendor's data handling protocols are not immediately clear, raising potential concerns regarding data privacy and security compliance with internal policies and relevant regulations. Which of the following approaches best navigates this situation from a regulatory compliance perspective? Option A. Proceed with the implementation of the new CRM system immediately to capitalize on the efficiency gains, assuming the vendor adheres to standard industry practices and addressing any compliance issues that may arise post-implementation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence process, including a thorough review of the vendor's data protection policies, security certifications, and contractual terms, and consult with Cox Holdings' legal and compliance departments to ensure alignment with all applicable regulations and internal guidelines before any deployment. Option C. Rely on the sales team's positive feedback regarding the system's user interface and functionality as sufficient evidence of its suitability, and proceed with adoption, assuming that any data privacy concerns can be managed through user training. Option D. Implement the new CRM system in a limited pilot phase with a small group of users, and only if no immediate data breaches are detected during the pilot. Proceed with a full rollout without further formal compliance review. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the implementation of the new CRM system immediately to capitalize on the efficiency gains, assuming the vendor adheres to standard industry practices and addressing any compliance issues that may arise post-implementation. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance, balancing the need for efficient business operations with the strict requirements of data privacy and integrity. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the COC Holdings' internal policies, which are themselves designed to align with broader regulatory expectations, in a situation where a new, potentially beneficial technology is being introduced. The pressure to innovate and gain a competitive edge can sometimes lead to overlooking or downplaying compliance risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of efficiency does not compromise the security and privacy of sensitive client data, which is a cornerstone of regulatory trust and legal obligation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment before implementation. This aligns with the fundamental principles of regulatory compliance, which mandate proactive identification and mitigation of risks. By engaging legal and compliance teams early, the company ensures that the proposed data handling practices are scrutinized against all relevant regulations and internal policies. This proactive stance prevents potential breaches, fines, and reputational damage. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and responsible data stewardship, fostering trust with clients and stakeholders. This approach is not merely about avoiding penalties, but about embedding compliance into the operational fabric of the business. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived efficiency gains without adequate due diligence fails to acknowledge the potential for significant regulatory and ethical breaches. Such an approach risks violating data protection laws, which often impose strict requirements on data collection, processing, storage, and transfer. For instance, if the new technology involves transferring data to a third-party vendor, failing to assess the vendor's compliance with data protection standards could lead to a breach of contract and regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach, which relies on informal assurances from the technology provider without independent verification, is ethically unsound and legally precarious. It abdicates the company's responsibility to ensure compliance, potentially exposing it to liability for the provider's shortcomings. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the principles of accountability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should include 1. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements and internal policies applicable to the situation. 2. Assessing the potential risks associated with the proposed action, including legal, financial, and reputational risks. 3. Evaluating the effectiveness of proposed mitigation strategies. 4. Consulting with relevant internal stakeholders, such as legal, compliance, and IT departments. And 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for significant cost optimization within the next fiscal quarter. A proposal has been put forward to immediately reduce the budget allocated to client training programs by 30%, citing a perceived low return on investment. This proposal has gained traction due to its potential for immediate, quantifiable cost savings. However, it has not yet been thoroughly assessed for its impact on client retention, regulatory compliance related to product usage, or the long-term development of client relationships. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to addressing this cost optimization request? Option A. Immediately implement the proposed 30% budget cut to client training to demonstrate swift action on cost reduction and address any negative consequences that may arise later. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the client training program's effectiveness, gathering data on client satisfaction, knowledge acquisition, and its correlation with client retention and regulatory adherence before making any decisions on budget adjustments. Option C. Inform clients that training budgets are being reduced due to financial pressures and offer them a reduced scope of training services at a higher per session cost. Option D. Reallocate the client training budget to a different department that has a more immediate and visible impact on revenue generation, assuming client training is a secondary concern. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the client training program's effectiveness, gathering data on client satisfaction, knowledge acquisition, and its correlation with client retention and regulatory adherence before making any decisions on budget adjustments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications of stakeholder relationships and regulatory compliance. The pressure to demonstrate quick financial wins can lead to short-sighted decisions that undermine trust and potentially violate ethical guidelines or internal policies. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that any proposed changes are sustainable, transparent, and aligned with the company's values and legal obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven, and inclusive evaluation of all potential cost-saving measures. This involves engaging with relevant departments, understanding the impact on service delivery, and considering the ethical implications of any proposed changes. By seeking diverse perspectives and conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, the company can identify solutions that are not only cost-effective, but also maintain stakeholder confidence and adhere to the principles of good corporate governance. This aligns with the ethical duty to act with integrity and due diligence, ensuring that decisions are made in the best interest of the company and its stakeholders, while respecting all applicable regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the impact on service quality or stakeholder perception would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a decline in customer satisfaction, damage the company's reputation, and potentially result in breaches of contractual obligations or regulatory requirements related to service standards. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established approval processes or withholding crucial information from relevant parties would represent a failure of transparency and accountability. This not only erodes trust, but also increases the risk of non-compliance with internal controls and external regulations, potentially leading to disciplinary action or legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes the interests of a single department or stakeholder group over the broader organizational impact would demonstrate a lack of strategic thinking and could create internal conflict and operational inefficiencies. This fails to uphold the principle of acting in the best overall interest of the company. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and the desired outcome. Second, gather comprehensive information from all relevant sources, including data, stakeholder input, and regulatory guidance. Third, identify and evaluate a range of potential solutions, considering their short-term and long-term impacts, risks, and ethical implications. Fourth, consult with appropriate internal and external experts. Fifth, make a well-reasoned decision based on the gathered evidence and analysis, ensuring it aligns with company policy, ethical standards, and legal requirements. Finally, communicate the decision and its rationale clearly to all affected parties and monitor the implementation and outcomes. Question 7. Market research demonstrates a significant shift in consumer sentiment regarding a particular asset class, suggesting a potential for substantial price appreciation. The research is proprietary and has not been publicly disclosed. The firm's trading desk is eager to capitalize on this insight, proposing immediate adjustments to their trading positions. However, the compliance department has raised concerns about the timing and method of acting on this information, citing potential regulatory implications. What is the most appropriate course of action for the firm? Option A. Disseminate the research findings to key institutional clients to inform their investment decisions, thereby sharing the insight. Option B. Ignore the research findings altogether to avoid any potential regulatory complications, even if it means missing a legitimate market opportunity. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the research's validity and potential market impact, consulting with compliance and legal teams to ensure any subsequent actions strictly adhere to fair disclosure and market integrity regulations before making any trading adjustments. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed trading adjustments to gain a first-mover advantage, assuming the research is accurate and will lead to market movements. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough internal review of the research's validity and potential market impact, consulting with compliance and legal teams to ensure any subsequent actions strictly adhere to fair disclosure and market integrity regulations before making any trading adjustments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to leverage new market insights for competitive advantage and the strict regulatory obligation to ensure fair and orderly markets. The pressure to act quickly on potentially market-moving information, without proper verification or adherence to established protocols, can lead to significant compliance breaches and reputational damage. The challenge lies in balancing commercial imperatives with the paramount duty to uphold regulatory integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured and compliant process for evaluating and acting upon new market research. This includes thorough internal review by relevant compliance and legal teams to assess the information's reliability, potential market impact, and adherence to disclosure regulations. Any subsequent action, such as adjusting trading strategies or informing clients, must be done in a manner that is consistent with regulatory requirements for fair disclosure and prevents insider trading or market manipulation. This upholds the principle of treating all market participants equitably and maintaining market confidence, which are core tenets of financial regulation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately disseminating the research findings to select clients or internal trading desks before a comprehensive regulatory review. This constitutes a potential breach of fair disclosure rules, as it could grant an unfair advantage to a limited group, leading to market manipulation or insider trading allegations. It violates the principle of equal access to material information. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the research findings entirely due to fear of regulatory scrutiny, even if the research is robust and could lead to beneficial, compliant strategic adjustments. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and potentially deprives the firm and its clients of legitimate opportunities, failing to act in the best interests of clients where appropriate and compliant. A third incorrect approach is to implement significant trading strategies based solely on the new research without considering existing regulatory restrictions or the potential for the research itself to be deemed manipulative if acted upon in a certain way. This overlooks the need for a holistic assessment of market impact and compliance, risking actions that could be construed as market abuse. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Information assessment. Critically evaluate the source, validity, and potential impact of new information. 2. Compliance check. Consult with compliance and legal departments to understand all relevant regulatory obligations and potential risks. 3. Structured action plan. Develop a plan for acting on the information that explicitly addresses compliance requirements, including disclosure protocols and trading restrictions. 4. Documentation. Maintain thorough records of the research, the review process, and any decisions made. This framework ensures that commercial objectives are pursued within the boundaries of the law and ethical standards. Question 8. During the evaluation of a new data privacy and security compliance framework for Koch Holding, which approach to implementation would best balance regulatory adherence with operational efficiency and minimize potential risks? Option A. Implement the framework across all business units simultaneously after a brief company-wide announcement, assuming immediate adoption. Option B. Delegate the entire implementation process to each business unit's IT department, with minimal central oversight. Option C. Focus solely on the technical deployment of the framework software components, with user training and policy integration addressed at a later, undefined stage. Option D. Conduct a pilot program in a selected business unit to test the framework's effectiveness and gather feedback before a phased rollout to other units. Correct answer is A. Implement the framework across all business units simultaneously after a brief company-wide announcement, assuming immediate adoption. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in implementing a new compliance framework within Koch Holding, specifically concerning data privacy and security. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for robust data protection with the operational requirements of business units, ensuring that the implementation is effective, efficient, and compliant with relevant regulations. This requires careful judgment to avoid creating undue burdens or loopholes. The correct approach emphasizes a phased rollout, starting with a pilot program in a controlled environment. This represents best professional practice because it allows for the identification and mitigation of potential issues before a full-scale deployment. It aligns with principles of risk management and iterative development, ensuring that the compliance framework is practical and addresses real-world challenges. Regulatory compliance is best achieved through a well-tested and adaptable system, minimizing the risk of breaches or noncompliance due to unforeseen implementation hurdles. This approach also fosters buy-in from business units by demonstrating the framework's efficacy in a limited scope. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate, company-wide implementation without adequate testing poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. It could lead to widespread noncompliance if the framework is flawed, exposing COC holding to penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without considering user training and ongoing support fails to address the human element of compliance, increasing the likelihood of errors and misuse of data. This neglects the ethical responsibility to ensure employees understand and can adhere to data protection policies. A third incorrect approach that delegates full responsibility for implementation to individual business units without centralized oversight creates a fragmented and inconsistent compliance landscape, increasing the risk of disparate interpretations and enforcement, which is a failure in corporate governance and regulatory adherence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment of the proposed implementation. This should be followed by a detailed planning phase that includes stakeholder consultation, resource allocation, and the development of clear objectives and success metrics. A phased approach, incorporating pilot testing and continuous feedback loops, is crucial for adaptive implementation. Finally, ongoing monitoring and evaluation are essential to ensure sustained compliance and identify areas for improvement. Question 9. Market research demonstrates a significant shift in consumer sentiment towards a particular product category, driven by emerging technological advancements. The research report, compiled by an external firm, contains detailed projections and identifies specific companies likely to benefit. A senior executive is considering how to leverage this information for the firm's investment strategies and client advisory services. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible and compliant approach for the firm to take? Option A. Disregard the research report entirely, as relying on external market research can introduce unforeseen risks and liabilities for the firm. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive internal review of the research report to ascertain the source and nature of the information, assess its materiality and public availability, and consult with the compliance department before any strategic decisions or client recommendations are made. Option C. Immediately adjust the firm's investment portfolio and recommend specific trades to clients based on the research report's projections, assuming the external firm has conducted thorough due diligence. Option D. Share the research report's key findings and projections with a select group of high-net-worth clients to gauge their interest and potential trading activity without further internal analysis. The correct answer is C. Immediately adjust the firm's investment portfolio and recommend specific trades to clients based on the research report's projections, assuming the external firm has conducted thorough due diligence. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the desire to leverage market insights for strategic advantage and the imperative to maintain ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in discerning where legitimate market analysis ends and potentially manipulative or unfair practices begin, especially when dealing with sensitive information or market-moving news. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are not only legal, but also uphold the integrity of the market and the firm's reputation. The correct approach, which involves a thorough internal review of the information's source, nature, and potential impact before any action is taken, represents best professional practice. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that emphasize fair dealing, market abuse prevention, and the responsible use of information. Specifically, it adheres to principles of insider trading prevention and the duty to act in the best interests of clients and the market. By conducting due diligence, the firm ensures it is not acting on material non-public information or engaging in practices that could be construed as market manipulation. This proactive stance minimizes legal and reputational risks. An incorrect approach that involves immediately acting on the market research findings without further scrutiny is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to regulatory breaches if the research is based on or has led to the dissemination of material non-public information, constituting insider dealing or market manipulation. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for fair market practices and could unfairly disadvantage other market participants. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the research entirely without understanding its implications, is also problematic. While it avoids immediate risk, it forfeits potential legitimate business opportunities and fails to demonstrate due diligence in understanding market dynamics, which is a core professional responsibility. A third incorrect approach, which is to share the research findings broadly with clients without assessing their nature or potential impact, carries significant regulatory risk. This could be interpreted as tipping or market manipulation, depending on the content of the research and the client's subsequent actions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, identify the nature of the information and its source. Second, assess whether the information is public or non-public, and if non-public, whether it is material. Third, consider the potential impact of acting on or disseminating this information on the market and other participants. Fourth, consult relevant internal policies, compliance departments, and legal counsel to ensure all actions are compliant with applicable regulations and ethical standards. Finally, document the decision-making process thoroughly. Question 10. The audit findings indicate a minor procedural deviation in expense reporting by a senior manager, which, while not immediately material, could set a precedent for future noncompliance. You have a good working relationship with this manager. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Document the finding in the audit report and initiate the standard internal reporting procedure for review and follow-up. Option B. Accept the senior manager's verbal assurance that it was an oversight and will not happen again, and do not include it in the formal report. Option C. Directly confront the senior manager, express your disappointment, and insist on an immediate correction and a formal apology. Option D. Discreetly inform a colleague in another department about the finding to gauge their opinion on how to proceed. The correct answer is A. Document the finding in the audit report and initiate the standard internal reporting procedure for review and follow-up. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between a desire to maintain a positive working relationship and the imperative to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The pressure to overlook a minor infraction, especially when it comes from a senior figure, can create a difficult ethical dilemma. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes integrity and adherence to the established regulatory framework. By documenting the finding and initiating the appropriate internal reporting procedure, the professional demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability. This aligns with the principles of professional conduct that emphasize honesty, objectivity, and the duty to report irregularities, as typically outlined in professional codes of conduct and relevant company policies, which are implicitly governed by the principles tested in the Koch Holding Hiring Assessment Test. An incorrect approach that involves ignoring the finding or accepting a verbal assurance without documentation fails to uphold professional responsibility. This could lead to a breach of internal controls and potentially violate regulatory expectations regarding accurate record-keeping and reporting. Accepting a verbal assurance without follow-up undermines the audit process and creates a precedent for overlooking issues, which is ethically unsound and could have serious consequences if the issue recurs or escalates. Another incorrect approach, such as confronting the senior manager directly and demanding immediate rectification without following established procedures, could be seen as insubordinate and may damage professional relationships unnecessarily. While the intent might be to resolve the issue quickly, it bypasses the structured process designed for such situations, potentially leading to misunderstandings or defensiveness rather than constructive resolution. This approach lacks the measured and procedural approach expected in professional environments. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's internal policies and the relevant ethical guidelines. The first step is to accurately identify and document the finding. Subsequently, the professional should consult the established reporting channels, which typically involve escalating the matter to their direct supervisor or the relevant compliance department. This ensures that the issue is addressed through the proper channels, allowing for a thorough investigation and appropriate action, while maintaining professional decorum and adherence to procedural integrity. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that during the vendor selection process for a critical project, A potential supplier offers a senior manager a significant discount on a personal purchase unrelated to the project, stating it's a gesture of goodwill before the final assessment results are announced. Option A. Politely decline the offer. Explain that all vendor interactions must be strictly professional and adhere to the established assessment criteria, and report the offer to the relevant compliance department for documentation and guidance. Option B. Accept the discount, assuming it's a common business practice and will not influence the assessment outcome, and proceed with the evaluation as planned. Option C. Ignore the offer and continue with the assessment without any acknowledgement, believing that as long as the decision is fair, the offer itself is irrelevant. Option D. Immediately terminate discussions with the vendor and disqualify them from the assessment due to the inappropriate offer, without further investigation or reporting. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the offer. Explain that all vendor interactions must be strictly professional and adhere to the established assessment criteria, and report the offer to the relevant compliance department for documentation and guidance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a valuable contract and the obligation to maintain ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The pressure to close a deal can sometimes lead individuals to overlook or rationalize minor deviations from established procedures, which can have significant downstream consequences. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to the holding hiring assessment tests established procurement guidelines. By seeking clarification and adhering strictly to the documented process, the employee upholds the integrity of the assessment and ensures a level playing field for all candidates. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty and fairness, and implicitly with any regulatory framework that mandates fair and transparent business practices, even if not explicitly detailed in the provided exam context. It avoids any appearance of impropriety or favoritism. An incorrect approach that involves accepting the vendor's offer of a small token of appreciation before the assessment is completed represents a significant ethical and potential regulatory failure. This action could be construed as an attempt to influence the outcome of the assessment, creating a conflict of interest and undermining the impartiality of the hiring process. It violates the principle of integrity and could lead to a breach of internal company policies designed to prevent bribery or undue influence. Furthermore, it could expose holding to reputational damage and legal scrutiny if such practices were discovered. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the assessment without acknowledging the vendor's offer but also without reporting it, is also professionally unacceptable. It avoids direct acceptance of a bribe. It demonstrates a lack of proactive ethical conduct. Failing to report a potential ethical breach or conflict of interest is a dereliction of duty. It allows a potentially compromising situation to persist and does not contribute to a culture of ethical awareness and accountability within the organization. This passive approach can be as damaging as active complicity. A third incorrect approach, which is to immediately reject the vendor's offer and sever all communication, while seemingly decisive, might be overly rigid and miss an opportunity for constructive dialogue. While the offer is inappropriate, a more nuanced approach would involve politely declining the offer and reiterating the commitment to the established assessment process. This allows for the possibility of continuing the business relationship on ethical grounds, provided the vendor understands and respects the boundaries. However, in the context of an assessment, the primary failure here is not reporting the offer, which is a critical step in maintaining process integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of internal policies and ethical codes. When faced with a situation that raises ethical concerns or potential conflicts of interest, the first step is to pause and assess the situation objectively. Next, consult relevant guidelines and policies. If ambiguity remains or if a clear ethical breach is suspected, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the designated ethics/compliance department is crucial. Documenting all interactions and decisions is also a vital part of professional practice. The ultimate goal is to act with integrity, transparency, and in accordance with all applicable rules and principles. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant, albeit isolated, improvement in a single key performance indicator for a specific operational stage. However, Initial analysis suggests this improvement might be a byproduct of a subtle shift in upstream processes that could have downstream implications not yet captured by the current monitoring scope. What is the most professionally sound approach to address this situation? Option A. Immediately implement the changes that appear to have caused the KPI improvement across the entire operational stage, assuming the positive trend will continue and benefit the overall process. Option B. Focus solely on replicating the conditions that led to the KPI improvement, without investigating the underlying causes or potential broader impacts on other parts of the system. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis of the observed KPI improvement, investigate potential upstream process shifts and their downstream impacts, and validate any proposed optimization through controlled testing before full implementation. Option D. Dismiss the KPI improvement as a statistical anomaly or temporary fluctuation, and continue with the existing operational procedures without further investigation. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis of the observed KPI improvement, investigate potential upstream process shifts and their downstream impacts, and validate any proposed optimization through controlled testing before full implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where initial data suggests a potential improvement, but a deeper understanding of the underlying process and its interdependencies is crucial. The challenge lies in distinguishing between superficial improvements and those that yield sustainable, significant gains, while also considering potential unintended consequences. Over-reliance on a single metric without holistic process evaluation can lead to misallocation of resources and suboptimal outcomes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted analysis that goes beyond the immediate data point. It requires understanding the root causes of the observed anomaly, considering the broader impact on other process stages, and validating the proposed solution through controlled testing or pilot programs. This aligns with best professional practice by emphasizing data-driven decision-making, risk assessment, and a commitment to continuous improvement that considers the entire system. It also implicitly adheres to principles of operational efficiency and resource management, which are often underpinned by regulatory expectations for sound business practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the immediate positive metric without investigating the cause or potential side effects. This represents a failure in due diligence and a lack of critical thinking. Ethically, it could lead to a situation where a perceived improvement masks a more significant underlying problem, potentially impacting product quality, customer satisfaction, or regulatory compliance in other areas. From a professional standpoint, it demonstrates a superficial understanding of process optimization and a disregard for comprehensive analysis. Another incorrect approach might involve implementing a change based on anecdotal evidence or intuition, rather than systematic data analysis and validation. This is professionally unsound, as it introduces unnecessary risk and deviates from evidence-based decision-making. It could lead to unintended negative consequences that are difficult to trace back and rectify, potentially violating principles of good governance and operational integrity. A third incorrect approach could be to dismiss the anomaly entirely without further investigation, assuming it's an outlier or a temporary fluctuation. This demonstrates a lack of proactivity and a missed opportunity for improvement. It can lead to stagnation and a failure to adapt to evolving operational needs or market demands, which can have long-term detrimental effects on the organization's competitiveness and sustainability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first seeking to understand the why behind any observed data. This involves a structured problem-solving methodology, such as root cause analysis. For implementing changes, a thorough impact assessment should be conducted, considering all relevant stakeholders and potential downstream effects. Pilot testing or phased implementation allows for validation and mitigation of risks. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure that improvements are sustained and to identify further optimization opportunities. This systematic and holistic approach ensures that decisions are robust, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives and professional standards. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a proposed process optimization initiative aims to significantly reduce operational costs by streamlining a key workflow. However, Concerns have been raised regarding the potential impact on data integrity and compliance with internal control frameworks. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for cost reduction with the imperative to maintain operational integrity and regulatory adherence? Option A. Immediately deploy the new, streamlined process across all relevant departments to realize cost savings as quickly as possible, relying on existing audit procedures to catch any significant issues. Option B. Introduce the new technology associated with the streamlined process without extensive integration testing, assuming it will be compatible with existing systems and data structures. Option C. Implement the streamlined process in a limited pilot program within a single department, closely monitoring key performance indicators and compliance metrics, and using the findings to refine the process before a wider rollout. Option D. Eliminate established quality control checkpoints within the workflow to achieve immediate cost reductions, assuming that the inherent efficiency of the new process will compensate for any loss in oversight. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy the new, streamlined process across all relevant departments to realize cost savings as quickly as possible, relying on existing audit procedures to catch any significant issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications of process changes on operational efficiency and compliance. Koch Holding, like any responsible entity, must ensure that any process optimization initiative does not inadvertently create new risks or violate existing regulatory requirements. The pressure to demonstrate quick wins through cost savings can lead to hasty decisions that overlook critical factors such as data integrity, system compatibility, and the potential for unintended consequences on downstream processes. Professional judgment is required to identify optimization opportunities that are sustainable and compliant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of process optimization, starting with a thorough impact assessment and pilot testing. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing a systematic and risk-aware methodology. Regulatory frameworks often mandate that changes to critical business processes, especially those involving data handling or financial reporting, undergo rigorous testing and validation before full deployment. This ensures that the optimization does not compromise data accuracy, system security, or compliance with relevant regulations. Pilot testing allows for the identification and mitigation of unforeseen issues in a controlled environment, thereby minimizing disruption and ensuring that the optimized process meets both efficiency and compliance objectives. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible operational management. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a new, unproven technology without adequate testing or integration planning represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It risks data corruption, system instability, and potential breaches of data privacy regulations, which could lead to substantial fines and reputational damage. Furthermore, it bypasses the due diligence expected in process optimization, where changes must be demonstrably beneficial and non-detrimental. Focusing solely on immediate cost savings by eliminating established quality control checkpoints, without a comprehensive analysis of their impact on product quality or service delivery, is also a failure. This approach disregards potential downstream consequences, including customer dissatisfaction, product recalls, and non-compliance with industry-specific quality standards or consumer protection laws. It prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and ethical responsibility. Adopting a new process based on anecdotal evidence or the perceived success in a different, unrelated industry, without a specific assessment of its applicability and compliance within Koch Holdings' context, is professionally unsound. This ignores the unique regulatory landscape and operational nuances of Koch Holding, potentially leading to noncompliance with local laws and industry-specific guidelines. It demonstrates a lack of rigorous analysis and a failure to adhere to principles of sound business practice. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization with a framework that emphasizes data-driven decision-making, risk management, and regulatory adherence. The process should involve 1. Defining clear objectives for optimization, including both efficiency gains and compliance maintenance. 2. Conducting a comprehensive analysis of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement. 3. Performing a thorough impact assessment of proposed changes, considering technical, operational, and regulatory implications. 4. Developing a phased implementation plan, including pilot testing and validation. 5. Establishing robust monitoring and feedback mechanisms to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. This structured approach ensures that optimization efforts are strategic, sustainable, and ethically sound. Question 14. Implementation of a financial support package for a distressed subsidiary requires the Koch Holding Treasury Department to evaluate various funding strategies. The subsidiary is facing significant liquidity challenges due to unforeseen market shifts and requires immediate capital injection to avoid insolvency. The Treasury Department must consider the impact on group liquidity, risk exposure, and the potential for setting precedents. Which of the following approaches best balances the subsidiary's immediate needs with the long-term financial health and strategic objectives of Koch Holding? Option A. Conduct a thorough due diligence on the subsidiary's financial situation and recovery plan, explore all viable internal group financing options, and if necessary, assess external financing that aligns with group risk appetite and financial strategy. Option B. Refuse any financial assistance to the subsidiary, citing the need to protect the overall financial health of Koch Holding, without exploring potential solutions or the subsidiary's strategic value. Option C. Immediately approve a substantial intercompany loan to the subsidiary without further investigation, prioritizing its short-term survival above all other group considerations. Option D. Offer a loan with excessively high interest rates and unachievable repayment terms to the subsidiary, designed to maximize immediate returns for the group regardless of the subsidiary's recovery prospects. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough due diligence on the subsidiary's financial situation and recovery plan, explore all viable internal group financing options, and if necessary, assess external financing that aligns with group risk appetite and financial strategy. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the immediate financial needs of a subsidiary with the long-term strategic interests and fiduciary duties owed to the Koch Holding Group as a whole. The subsidiary's management is focused on short-term survival, potentially overlooking broader implications. The group's Treasury Department must consider the impact on overall group liquidity, risk exposure, and the potential for setting precedents that could undermine group-wide financial stability. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions serve the best interests of the entire group, not just a single entity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the subsidiary's financial distress, exploring all available internal group financing options, and conducting a rigorous due diligence process. This includes evaluating the subsidiary's business plan, the viability of its proposed restructuring, and the potential for recovery. If internal financing is deemed insufficient or too risky, the next step is to explore external financing options, ensuring that any such arrangement aligns with the group's overall financial strategy and risk appetite. This approach upholds the fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the entire group, promotes transparency, and ensures responsible financial management. Adhering to principles of good corporate governance and sound financial practice expected within a holding company structure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately approving a substantial intercompany loan without adequate due diligence. This fails to meet the fiduciary duty to protect the group's assets, as it risks exposing the group to significant losses if the subsidiary's recovery plan is not viable. It bypasses essential risk assessment and governance procedures, potentially violating internal policies and best practices for intragroup financial transactions. Another incorrect approach is to refuse any financial assistance to the subsidiary, citing only the group's overall financial health. A group health is important. A complete refusal without exploring potential solutions or understanding the root cause of distress can be detrimental. It may lead to the failure of a strategically important subsidiary, resulting in a loss of market share, intellectual property, or future revenue streams for the entire group. This approach can be seen as a failure to act prudently and to explore all reasonable avenues to preserve group value. Third incorrect approach is to offer a loan with punitive interest rates and stringent repayment terms that are clearly unachievable for the distressed subsidiary. While some level of caution is warranted, such terms are punitive rather than supportive and are unlikely to lead to a sustainable recovery. This can be interpreted as an attempt to exploit the subsidiary's weakness rather than to facilitate its rehabilitation, potentially leading to further financial strain and ultimately a greater loss for the group. It also demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight regarding the subsidiary's long-term contribution to the group. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the problem. This involves gathering all relevant financial and operational data, assessing the root causes of the subsidiary's distress, and evaluating its strategic importance to the group. Next, they should identify and evaluate all potential solutions, prioritizing those that align with the group's overall financial strategy and risk management framework. This includes exploring internal financing, restructuring options, and, if necessary, external financing. Throughout this process, maintaining open communication with all relevant stakeholders, including the subsidiary's management and the group's board, is crucial. The final decision should be based on a thorough risk-benefit analysis, ensuring that it is in the best long-term interest of Koch Holding. Question 15. System analysis indicates that Koch Holding is evaluating two significant investment proposals. Proposal Alpha offers a high probability of a moderate return within 18 months, directly addressing a current market demand and improving operational efficiency. Proposal Beta, while carrying a higher degree of uncertainty and a longer payback period of 3-4 years, has the potential to disrupt a new market segment and establish Koch Holding as an industry leader in emerging technologies. Management is under pressure to demonstrate strong quarterly financial performance. Which decision-making approach best balances immediate pressures with long-term strategic vision? Option A. Initiate a thorough due diligence process for both proposals, involving cross-functional teams to assess strategic fit, risk-adjusted returns, and long-term market impact, ultimately recommending the proposal that best aligns with Koch Holding's overarching strategic objectives and risk appetite, regardless of immediate financial pressures. Option B. Focus solely on Proposal Alpha, as its certainty of return is paramount given the current pressure for strong quarterly performance, and disregard Proposal Beta as too speculative. Option C. Select Proposal Beta immediately, believing that disruptive innovation is always the superior strategy, without a detailed analysis of its risks or financial viability. Option D. Prioritize Proposal Alpha due to its shorter payback period and immediate positive impact on quarterly financials, deferring consideration of Proposal Beta until market conditions are more stable. Correct answer is D. Prioritize Proposal Alpha due to its shorter payback period and immediate positive impact on quarterly financials, deferring consideration of Proposal Beta until market conditions are more stable. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate financial pressures and the long-term strategic implications of a significant investment decision. The pressure to meet short-term performance targets can lead to a temptation to prioritize projects with quicker, more visible returns, potentially at the expense of more transformative but longer gestation initiatives. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that decisions align with the company's overarching mission and sustainable growth objectives, rather than succumbing to short-term expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it embodies a structured, data-driven, and stakeholder-aligned decision-making framework. It prioritizes a comprehensive evaluation of all relevant factors, including strategic fit, risk assessment, and potential for long-term value creation, before committing resources. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and responsible investment, ensuring that decisions are not only financially sound, but also ethically defensible and strategically sound for the sustained success of Koch Holding. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate return on investment without considering the strategic alignment or potential long-term risks would represent a failure to adhere to prudent financial management and strategic planning principles. This could lead to suboptimal resource allocation and a missed opportunity for innovation or market leadership. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes personal gain or the interests of a specific department over the overall welfare of the company would constitute a serious ethical breach and a violation of fiduciary duties. Such actions undermine trust and can lead to significant reputational damage and legal repercussions. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal biases rather than objective analysis would fail to meet the standards of professional due diligence and could result in flawed decision-making with detrimental consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves clearly defining the problem, gathering comprehensive and objective information, identifying and evaluating all viable alternatives, assessing the risks and benefits of each alternative, consulting with relevant stakeholders, and making a reasoned decision based on the best available evidence and strategic objectives. This process should be documented to ensure transparency and accountability. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that Aish, a junior financial analyst at Koch Holding, has identified a potential inconsistency in a quarterly report that, if confirmed, could indicate a misstatement of revenue. She has double-checked her calculations and the source data, and the discrepancy appears significant. Aish is unsure of the best course of action to ensure this issue is addressed appropriately and professionally. What is the most appropriate initial step for Aish to take? Option A. Immediately draft an email to the Chief Financial Officer detailing her concerns and the potential implications of the discrepancy. Option B. Discuss her findings with a senior colleague in a different department to get their opinion on the matter. Option C. Ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor error that will be caught in a later audit. Option D. Document the discrepancy thoroughly with supporting data and immediately report it to her direct supervisor, Mayman, for his review and guidance. Correct answer is D. Document the discrepancy thoroughly with supporting data and immediately report it to her direct supervisor, Mayman, for his review and guidance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a junior analyst, Aish, has identified a potential discrepancy in a financial report that could have significant implications for Koch Holding stakeholders. The challenge lies in navigating the internal reporting structure and ensuring the information is escalated appropriately and handled with due diligence, without causing undue alarm or compromising the integrity of the investigation. Aish must balance her responsibility to report her findings with the need to follow established protocols and avoid premature conclusions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves Aish meticulously documenting her findings, including the specific data points and the nature of the discrepancy, and then escalating this information to her direct supervisor, Mayman. This aligns with standard professional practice and regulatory expectations for internal controls and reporting. Supervisors are responsible for overseeing the work of their teams and have the authority and experience to assess the significance of such findings and initiate further investigation or reporting as necessary. This ensures that the information is handled by individuals with the appropriate level of expertise and authority, adhering to the principle of hierarchical reporting and internal governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves Aish immediately reporting her concerns to senior management without informing her supervisor. This bypasses the established reporting lines, potentially undermining Mayman's authority and creating an impression of distrust. It also risks overwhelming senior management with details that might be better handled at a lower level, or it could lead to misinterpretations if the initial findings are not fully contextualized. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of respect for the organizational hierarchy and established communication channels. Another incorrect approach is for Aish to ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor error or outside her purview. This is a significant ethical and professional failure. It neglects her duty to act with diligence and integrity, potentially allowing a material issue to go unaddressed, which could harm the company and its stakeholders. This inaction could also violate internal policies related to error reporting and compliance. A third incorrect approach is for Aish to discuss her findings with colleagues outside of the formal reporting structure before escalating. This could lead to the spread of unverified information, speculation, and potentially damage the reputation of individuals or the company. It also compromises the confidentiality of the investigation and could interfere with a structured and objective assessment of the discrepancy. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. First, they should clearly identify the issue and gather all relevant facts. Second, they should consult internal policies and procedures regarding reporting and escalation. Third, they should communicate their findings to their immediate supervisor or designated point of contact, providing clear, concise, and factual information. Fourth, they should be prepared to answer questions and provide further details as requested. Finally, They should follow the guidance provided by their superiors and cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation. This systematic approach ensures that issues are addressed efficiently, ethically, and in compliance with organizational and regulatory standards. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed supplier partnership offers significant cost savings and increased efficiency for Cock Holding. However, there are concerns that this supplier may not fully comply with certain environmental standards mandated by Cock Holding's sustainability policy, although no explicit legal breach is immediately apparent. The immediate financial benefit is substantial, but the potential for future reputational damage and indirect regulatory scrutiny is a concern. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound decision-making approach? Option A. Proceed with the supplier partnership immediately to secure the cost savings, assuming that any minor environmental noncompliance will be addressed later if it becomes a significant issue. Option B. Proceed with the supplier partnership, but implement internal monitoring processes to track the supplier's environmental performance, accepting the risk of potential future issues. Option C. Decline the supplier partnership due to the potential environmental concerns, prioritizing adherence to the sustainability policy over immediate financial gains. Option D. Seek further clarification and independent verification of the supplier's environmental compliance, and if concerns are not fully allayed, escalate the decision to a higher authority within Cock Holding for review. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the supplier partnership immediately to secure the cost savings, assuming that any minor environmental noncompliance will be addressed later if it becomes a significant issue. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate financial gains against potential long-term reputational damage and regulatory noncompliance. The decision-maker must navigate conflicting priorities, where a seemingly beneficial short-term outcome could lead to significant future liabilities. The core of the challenge lies in assessing intangible risks and ethical considerations that are not easily quantifiable in a standard cost-benefit analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Cock Holding's internal code of conduct and relevant industry regulations, even when faced with pressure for immediate profitability. This demonstrates integrity and a commitment to sustainable business practices. By seeking clarification and escalating the issue through appropriate channels, the professional upholds ethical standards and ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of potential consequences and regulatory implications. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are paramount in maintaining stakeholder trust and long-term business viability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing short-term profit without considering the ethical implications or regulatory framework would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of the Cock Holding's code of conduct, potentially resulting in disciplinary action, fines, or legal penalties. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the company's reputation and long-term strategic interests. Another incorrect approach that involves making an assumption about the legality or ethicality of the situation without seeking proper guidance is also professionally unsound. This can lead to unintended consequences and a failure to identify and mitigate risks effectively. It bypasses established procedures for decision-making and risk assessment, which are designed to protect the company and its stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the situation and identify all relevant stakeholders and potential impacts. Second, consult the relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and external regulations. Third, if there is any ambiguity or uncertainty, seek clarification from legal, compliance, or senior management. Fourth, document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Finally, continuously monitor the situation and be prepared to adapt the decision if new information emerges. Question 18. Investigation of the potential consequences of introducing a new, highly automated production line at a Cock Holding manufacturing facility, considering its broad implications beyond immediate cost reductions. Option A. Focus exclusively on the technical specifications and efficiency gains of the new equipment, disregarding non-quantifiable factors like employee morale or local environmental concerns. Option B. Prioritize the rapid deployment of the new machinery to achieve immediate cost savings, assuming any negative impacts will be addressed reactively as they arise. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with a few long-term employees and a cursory review of publicly available environmental data to gauge potential impacts. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates environmental effects, workforce implications, community relations, and supply chain adjustments, developing mitigation and enhancement plans based on the findings. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates environmental effects, workforce implications, community relations, and supply chain adjustments, developing mitigation and enhancement plans based on the findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of a significant change on stakeholders and the environment. The Koch Holding Hiring Assessment Test, in its regulatory framework, emphasizes a proactive and comprehensive approach to change management, particularly concerning its potential impact. Careful judgment is required to identify all relevant impacts, assess their severity, and develop appropriate mitigation strategies, ensuring compliance with any applicable environmental and social governance-esque guidelines that Koch Holding adheres to, as well as general principles of responsible business conduct. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically identifies, analyzes, and plans for the potential consequences of the proposed operational changes. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management and strategic planning, which are implicitly expected in a professional assessment context. By conducting a thorough impact assessment, the organization demonstrates foresight, a commitment to stakeholder well-being, and a responsible approach to business operations, thereby minimizing potential negative externalities and ensuring sustainable growth. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining corporate reputation and avoiding future regulatory scrutiny or remediation costs. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings of the new machinery fails to consider the broader implications. This would be a regulatory and ethical failure, as it neglects potential environmental impacts, e.g., increased emissions, waste generation, and social impacts, e.g., job displacement, community disruption, that may be subject to internal company policies or broader ethical expectations of responsible corporate citizenship. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough assessment risks overlooking critical issues, leading to unforeseen problems, potential noncompliance with emerging ESG standards, and damage to stakeholder relationships. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the comprehensive nature of impact assessment as a risk mitigation tool. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or superficial reviews would be professionally unacceptable due to its lack of rigor and potential for biased conclusions, failing to provide a sound basis for decision-making, and potentially leading to significant, unaddressed negative impacts. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the proposed change. This should be followed by a systematic identification of all potential impact areas: environmental, social, economic, operational. For each identified impact, a qualitative and, where appropriate, quantitative assessment of its likelihood and severity should be conducted. Subsequently, mitigation strategies should be developed for significant negative impacts and enhancement strategies for potential positive impacts. The findings and recommendations should then be documented and communicated to relevant stakeholders, forming the basis for an informed decision on whether and how to proceed with the change. Question 19. What factors determine the comprehensiveness and effectiveness of an impact assessment for a new strategic initiative within Koch Holding? Option A. The extent to which the assessment prioritizes immediate profitability and shareholder value above all other considerations. Option B. The degree to which the assessment relies on anecdotal feedback from a select group of senior executives. Option C. The speed at which the assessment can be completed to facilitate rapid project deployment. Option D. The systematic identification and evaluation of potential economic, social, environmental, and operational consequences, alongside stakeholder engagement and risk mitigation planning. The correct answer is D. The systematic identification and evaluation of potential economic, social, environmental, and operational consequences, alongside stakeholder engagement and risk mitigation planning. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new initiative against its potential negative consequences, which could impact stakeholders, the company's reputation, and its financial stability. The challenge lies in accurately identifying, assessing, and mitigating these risks within the framework of Koch Holdings' operational guidelines and relevant Turkish regulations. A superficial assessment could lead to significant unforeseen problems, regulatory noncompliance, or missed opportunities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and systematic impact assessment. This methodology, aligned with best practices in corporate governance and risk management, mandates a thorough evaluation of potential positive and negative effects across various dimensions: economic, social, environmental, and operational. It requires engaging relevant stakeholders, gathering data, and developing mitigation strategies for identified risks. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and proactive risk management, which are implicitly expected under Turkish corporate law and the general principles of good business practice that Koch Holding would adhere to. A robust impact assessment ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and the company operates in a sustainable and compliant manner. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on immediate financial gains without considering broader implications is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach neglects potential long-term reputational damage, stakeholder dissatisfaction, and even legal liabilities that could arise from unassessed negative impacts. It violates the principle of due diligence and responsible corporate citizenship. Prioritizing stakeholder opinions without objective analysis is also problematic. While stakeholder input is crucial, it must be integrated into a structured assessment process. Relying solely on opinions without rigorous evaluation can lead to biased decision-making, overlooking critical risks or opportunities that stakeholders may not fully articulate or understand. This can result in suboptimal outcomes and potential noncompliance if the opinions do not align with regulatory requirements or sound business principles. Adopting a reactive approach, addressing issues only as they arise, is a clear failure in risk management and regulatory compliance. This reactive stance demonstrates a lack of foresight and proactive governance, which can lead to significant financial penalties, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. It is contrary to the principles of sound corporate governance and the expectation of responsible management to anticipate and mitigate potential problems. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, data-driven, and forward-looking approach to impact assessment. This involves 1. Defining the scope and objectives of the assessment clearly. 2. Identifying all relevant stakeholders and their potential interests. 3. Systematically identifying potential positive and negative impacts across all relevant domains. 4. Gathering and analyzing data to quantify and qualify these impacts. 5. Developing robust mitigation and enhancement strategies. 6. Documenting the assessment process and findings thoroughly. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating the assessment as circumstances change. This systematic process ensures that decisions are well-informed, risks are managed effectively, and the company operates ethically and in compliance with all applicable regulations. Question 20. When evaluating the potential consequences of a new large-scale infrastructure project proposed by Koch Holding, which approach to impact assessment best aligns with responsible corporate governance and ethical considerations, ensuring a balanced consideration of all potential outcomes? Option A. Conducting a detailed economic feasibility study that prioritizes projected financial returns and operational efficiencies, with minimal consideration for non-financial impacts. Option B. Performing a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically identifies and analyzes potential economic, social, and environmental effects, including proactive engagement with all affected stakeholders to gather diverse perspectives and inform mitigation strategies. Option C. Relying on historical data from similar projects undertaken by competitors to estimate potential impacts, without conducting specific assessments for the current initiative. Option D. Focusing the impact assessment primarily on regulatory compliance requirements, addressing only those impacts explicitly mandated by current legislation. The correct answer is A. Conducting a detailed economic feasibility study that prioritizes projected financial returns and operational efficiencies, with minimal consideration for non-financial impacts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Koch Holding, as a significant entity, must navigate the complexities of impact assessment for a new strategic initiative. The challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of the initiative against its potential negative consequences, ensuring that all stakeholders are considered and that the assessment is thorough, objective, and compliant with relevant regulatory frameworks. The need for a robust impact assessment stems from the responsibility to act in a manner that is both commercially sound and ethically responsible, minimizing unintended harm and maximizing positive contributions. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and multifaceted impact assessment that considers economic, social, and environmental factors. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring a holistic understanding of the initiative's potential effects. Specifically, it requires identifying all relevant stakeholders, proactively engaging with them to understand their concerns and perspectives, and systematically evaluating the potential positive and negative impacts across all dimensions. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes transparency, fairness, and accountability. It also adheres to the principles of responsible corporate citizenship, which are increasingly embedded in regulatory expectations for large organizations. By systematically gathering data, analyzing potential outcomes, and developing mitigation strategies for negative impacts, Koch Holding demonstrates a commitment to sustainable and responsible business practices. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the economic benefits of the initiative, neglecting potential social or environmental repercussions. This failure represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It demonstrates a disregard for broader stakeholder interests and could lead to reputational damage, legal challenges, and long-term negative consequences for the company and the communities in which it operates. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment without adequate stakeholder engagement. This is ethically problematic as it fails to acknowledge the legitimate concerns of those who may be affected by the initiative. It also increases the risk of overlooking critical impacts that could have been identified through dialogue, leading to unforeseen problems and potential noncompliance with emerging stakeholder-focused regulations. Furthermore, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or biased information, rather than rigorous data collection and objective analysis, is professionally unacceptable. This undermines the credibility of the assessment and increases the likelihood of flawed decision-making, potentially leading to regulatory breaches and ethical compromises. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. Second, identify all potential stakeholders and their interests. Third, develop a methodology for data collection and analysis that is comprehensive, objective, and considers economic, social, and environmental factors. Fourth, engage in meaningful stakeholder consultation throughout the process. Fifth, analyze the findings, identify potential risks and opportunities, and develop appropriate mitigation and enhancement strategies. Finally, document the assessment process and findings transparently, and use them to inform strategic decision-making.